Okay, here we go. We're going to go over the worksheets. We're going to go over the worksheet from section 8.4. 8.4 worksheet. And this is, what is it, page 103? Page 103. All right, so let's take a look at 3 through 8. It says use a special right triangle. So it says find the sine of 30 degrees. Now, obviously, you can just put that into a calculator, find the sine of 30 degrees. It's not really that hard. But what if I asked you to do it as a fraction? Well, this one actually kind of, well, actually, let's see, sine of 30. Now, this, you can figure out what the fraction is just by looking at the calculator. Watch, if I put the sine of 30. Now, in this calculator, what do? We hit the sine first, and then you hit 30, right? There it is, it's 0.5. So you know what 0.5 is as a fraction. So if I ask you to write it as a fraction and a decimal, I mean, you could just look at that 0.5 and figure it out, right? So what is the fraction if the answer is 0.5? It's a half. Okay, pretty easy. But what if I did this? What if I said the cosine of 30 degrees? Watch, the cosine of 30 degrees. It's that big crazy number. Is there any way that you can figure out what the fraction is with that big crazy decimal? There's probably not, is there? All right. I put 31. I sure did. Let's try that again. Cosine of 30 degrees. Is that better? There we go. We still get a big crazy decimal. Okay. All right. No, it's not really gonna give you the fraction that I'm looking for this. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna try to figure out what the fraction is, what the exact answer is, not the approximation. So it says the sine of 30 degrees. It said use a special triangle. So what kind of triangle do you think we're gonna use? We've talked about these triangles before. We'll use it's a right triangle because you can only do trig functions with right triangles, but it's also it's more than just a right triangle. It's what? It's got a 30-degree angle in it. So it's 30, 60, 90. Right, 30, 60, 90. We just finished doing those not that long ago. All right, that should be fresh in your mind. Is it not? Okay, so watch, 30, 60, 90. There's 30, right? And we want to find the sine. Yes. Yes. Thought you were going to have a good math question here. Let's see. You know what? Let's just do this. Let's make the hypotenuse a 1. Now, I wouldn't expect you to be able to do this last night, okay? But you could have definitely stuck that into a calculator and got the answer, couldn't you? Okay, but what I want to do right now is let's just make the hypotenuse a 1 and figure out what these other two sides are going to be. All right? Now, it's 30, 60, 90. So what's the most important side we need to find? The short side. So this right here would be the short side. How do we find the short side? Remember, the hypotenuse is what? It's twice. Good. It's double the short side. So if I know the hypotenuse, let's just say it's 1, what would the hypotenuse, or what would the short side be? It'd be 0.5 or a half. We'll write it as a fraction, okay? So it'd be a half. Would you agree? What would the long side be? What was the relationship with the long side? The long side was what? The square root of 3 times the what? Times the short side. All right, so it's the square root of 3 times what? 1/2. Now watch how we write this, though. I'll write this a little cleaner. Square root of 3 times 1 is just square root of 3 over what? 2. All right? So look what we have. If I call this, and don't worry too much about, well, how do you know that the hypotenuse is 1? All right? This is a half of whatever I made the hypotenuse. I could have made the hypotenuse anything. I could have made it, 12. I could have made it 158.3. I don't know. Okay, but this will always be what? Half of this. You follow me? This right here will always be the square root of 3 times this, or the square root of 3 over 2 times this. All right, no matter what that number is. I just made it easy for us and just made that a 1. So that if this was 1, this would be a half, and this would be square root of 3 over 2. Now, how in the world does that help me figure out what the sine is? Well, here's the angle right here, the sine of 30 degrees. Let's write down our little device. What's our little mnemonic device? It's SOHCAHTOA. SOHCAHTOA. All right. I want to find the sine of this angle. So I go to the 30 degrees, and let's find the sine. What is the sine? It's the what over the what? The opposite over the hypotenuse, okay? So watch. It's the opposite. So I'm going to write this down. Watch. The sine of 30 is equal to the opposite. What's the opposite of this 30 degrees? It's a half. Over what? The hypotenuse. What's my hypotenuse? 1. What's 1/2 divided by 1? It's just a half, isn't it? Right? Yeah, anything divided by 1 is just itself, right? So what's the sine of 30 then? Sine of 30 is a half. Plug it into a calculator and see. We just did it a couple minutes ago. All right? All right? I'm just showing you. Now listen, don't freak out over this because I told you that you could just do this. All right? You can just put this into your calculator and get a decimal answer. I'm fine with that. I'm just showing you what they are expecting you to do. But for you guys, I'll just let you put this into a calculator. That's all I'll make you do. But I think for some of you guys need to see this. Probably not that soon. Come on, you guys are bumming me out a little bit, okay? It's because it just seems like you're. It's more than just a question though. It's like, oh, I can't do this. It's like you're defeated already, okay? We just went over this just yesterday. We really, basically, was the first day we really hit this hard. Okay, you've only had 1 day experience with this, okay? You're going to have to get over that, all right? You're going to have to look at this and say, okay, it's a little tough right now, but I'm going to figure it out. Okay, Mr. Hamrick always goes over it a million times, gives me plenty of chance to learn this stuff, all right? So you got to go with that attitude. I'm feeling a negative vibe in here, okay? Negative attitude. And we can't have that. You should look at this and say, oh, okay, now I see what you're doing. But instead we're going, ugh, that was way too long. I'll never be able to do this. You're bumming yourself out. You really are, okay? You're bringing yourselves down. All right, you got to have more of a positive attitude about this, okay? We'll go over this a bunch. Okay, I'm going to give you opportunities to learn how to do this stuff. So don't get too discouraged right now because that kind of bleeds over to me. You know what I mean? It just kind of and yes, I'm not emotional. It's just I want you to learn how to do this and I feel yourself I feel the mood. I feel the mood kind of going down, and I don't want that. Okay, I want to have more of a positive atmosphere in here, more of a positive vibe. That's what I'm trying to do. Now look, that's the sine of 30. What if they asked you for the cosine of 30 degrees? Now watch how easy. We've set it up already, haven't we? Let's pay attention. Let's look up here. Let's look up here. Right here, we've already set it up. I made the hypotenuse 1. We said the short side was a half. We said the long side was the square root of 3 over 2. Let's try this again. We've already set this thing up. I've got the hypotenuse as 1. I've got this short side as a half, and I've got the longer side as the square root of 3 over 2. This time, I'm going to ask you for the cosine of 30 degrees. Well, what's the cosine equal to? It's equal to what? The adjacent over the hypotenuse. So let's put those numbers in. What is adjacent to the 30 degrees? It's the square root of 3 over 2. It's right in front of you. Okay, it's right there. It's the square root of 3 over 2. So it's the adjacent over the hypotenuse, and the hypotenuse is 1. So what's the square root of 3 over 2 over 1? It's just the square root of 3 over 2. And that's how you write the fraction part of it. That's how you do the fraction. There's no way you could have looked at this and said, oh yeah, that's square root of 3 over 2. I mean, nobody in here would have been able to figure that out. Okay, but that's exactly what it is. Let me show you. Let's watch. The square root of 3 divided by 2 equals, look at that, it's the same exact number, isn't it? So would you agree the square root of 3 over 2 is the same thing as the cosine of 30? It is. Okay? It's the same exact thing. And that's how we do it. Okay? It's a little bit weird because we made the hypotenuse 1. You would have never thought of doing that, and I understand that. But once you realize to make that a 1, and then this is a half, and that's square root of 3 over 2, the rest of it's actually pretty easy. We did the sine. We did the cosine. Let's now do the tangent. Let's do the tangent of 30 degrees. The tangent of 30 degrees, look up here, is the opposite divided by the adjacent. So this is a little bit more complicated because it's not over 1. Hope you guys are enjoying yourself because I'm ready to go to the next lesson and forget this and give you a test on it this week. let's do the tangent. The tangent is the opposite over the adjacent. So the opposite is a half over the adjacent, which is the square root of 3 over 2. Now again, that's a little more complicated than we did right here. Dividing by 1 was easy because you really didn't have to do anything. But this takes a little bit of extra thought, not much. Just watch what we do here. It's 1/2. Instead of divided by, what do we do when we divide fractions? We multiply by the what? Reciprocal. So I'm going to put 2 over the square root of 3. Now there's a couple steps here, but don't flip out just because you got to do a couple extra things. So look what happens. It's 1/2 divided by the square root of 2, or square root of 3 over 2, which is the same thing as this. Let's simplify this. 2 cancels right here. What am I left with? 1 over the square root of 3. But we have a little problem there, don't we? Why can't we leave it like that? Because the square root of 3 on the bottom. We've talked about this many, many times now. How do we get rid of that square root of 3? Multiply the top and bottom by the square root of 3. Let's see what we get. 1 times the square root of 3 is the square root of 3. Over square root of 3 times square root of 3 is just 3. That's the answer that I read off to you. All right, didn't we do the tangent of 30 degrees? Wasn't that one of these? Yep, number 7 was a tangent of 30 degrees. All right, you could easily put it into a calculator, get a decimal approximation, but this is the fraction. This is what the fraction would be. Let's put them both in and let's see. Watch. I'm going to put in the tangent of 30 because it asks for both. It asks you to do the fraction and the decimal. Because you guys don't know, listen to me, you guys don't know what's ahead of you. I do. I've been there, I've taught it. Okay? You guys are just short-sighted. And that's not your fault. It's just because you don't know what's ahead of you, right? You just don't know what's down the road. I do know what's down the road, and I'm telling you right now that knowing how to do this stuff is going to help you down the road. I'm thinking more Algebra 2. And most of you, if not all of you, will be taking Algebra 2 next year, and you will be doing some trig. So the stuff that I'm doing right now will help you a lot. Some of you guys are going to go beyond Algebra 2 and take pre-calc. This stuff is super, super important when you start taking pre-calc. All right, so I know what's best for you. I really do. And I'm trying to give you the stuff that you're going to need to know how to do later. All right, so I don't want to just have you rely on the decimal. I want you to know what these exact values are because you're going to have to do a lot of this stuff. Not just this little bit, but a lot of this later on in your math career. All right, so just trust me on this. So the tangent of 30 is equal to that number right there. I'm just showing you again that the square root of 3 over 3 is the same exact number as what the tangent of 30 is. So let's put the square root of 3 over 3. Square root of 3 divided by, I might. The square root, look at that. It's the same exact thing, isn't it? So the square root of 3 over 3 is the same thing as the tangent of 30. It's the same exact number. All right? And I very well, look, I'm taking all this time. I wouldn't take all this time if I didn't want you to do this. It's your responsibility to go back and watch the video, take good notes on this, and learn how to do this stuff. Okay? At first, it's a little frustrating. I can tell. I can see the frustration on your face that doing these couple extra steps is stuff that you didn't realize that you would have to do. But these are things that we've done before. This right here, changing a fraction into a multiplication or a division into a multiplication, you did the back in 5th grade. You multiplied by the reciprocal. Right here, we've been doing this the last 2 or 3 days, getting rid of the square root on the bottom and then by multiplying top and bottom by the square root. So these are things that you know how to do already. So it's not like this is all brand new stuff. That's what math is. You got to remember stuff that you've done in the past. All right? I mean, that's what it is. That's how it works. All right, enough of that. Let's go on to the other stuff. Let's take a look at number 9. And you guys, I've said this before, but mentally, you got to toughen up a little bit. All right? You got to toughen up a little bit. I'm not saying that to be mean or rude or anything like that. I'm just saying mentally, you got to be a little tougher. When things get a little bit hard, you can't quit. You can't say, oh, I'll never be able to do this. This is going to be on the test. I'll never be able to do this. You can't have that attitude. It's all about your perspective. It's all about your attitude into going into this stuff. So you got to keep an open mind, and you got to keep telling yourself, all right, he says I can do it. I'm going to have to trust him. And if I put enough hard work into it and I study enough, and I listen to the things he says, and if I watch the videos, and if I go to other videos online, and if I take good notes, I will be able to do this stuff. All right? I've taught it for many, many, many years. I've had hundreds and hundreds of kids be able to do this stuff. Okay? So it's not that you can't handle it. You can handle it. All right? You're no less equipped to do it than any other class that I've taught. Let's take a look at this. You got to solve for x. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the angle that they give us. They give us this 36 degrees right here. So we're going to use this angle, and we're going to take a look at these two sides. If we're using this 36 degree angle, what is this side? I've got three sides. I got a hypotenuse, right? What is this side right here to that 36 degree angle? It's the opposite. Good. And what is this 7 to this 36 degree angle? It's adjacent. All right, the triangle looks a little weird because it's on its hypotenuse. So a lot of times we're used to seeing it up on one leg or something like that, okay? But that's the way it is. That's the adjacent, that's the hypotenuse, and that's the opposite. So we're trying to solve for x. So we need opposite in it. And what other number do they give us? The 7. So that means we need adjacent in it. Which trig function, I'll write these down again. I've written these down a whole bunch, so you should have these memorized. Which trig function uses opposite and adjacent? Right, the tangent, okay? So it's the tangent. The tangent of what? It all depends on which angle that we're starting from. Where are we starting from? The 36 degrees. So we take the tangent of 36 degrees and we set it equal to what? According to the tangent function. The opposite over the adjacent. Which one's the opposite? X. Which one's the adjacent? 7. So that's how we set it up. And now you just have to do a little math and solve for x. And it's just a little bit. I got to get x by itself. I have to get rid of the 7. How do I get rid of a 7? If it's being divided. I almost gave it away. You multiply, right. Multiply both sides by 7. So that cancels out, and we multiply that by 7. Stick that into your calculator, and you got your answer. So let's put it in this calculator right here. Now on mine, I just write it exactly the way it looks right here. I write 7, and then the tangent, and then 36. And that's your answer. We rounded to 2 places, I think, right? Yeah, they rounded to 2 places. So what would that be? 5.09, right? That 5 rounds at 8 to a 9. So it'd be 5.09. All right? That's what x would equal. Now, what if you had your calculator and you wanted to do this? You don't put it in exactly the way I did. Okay, what do you put in first? Yeah, do the tangent of 36, but you don't put tangent first. What do you hit first? What's the first button you hit? Hit 36, then you hit what? Tangent, and then you multiply, okay? Don't just hit a 7. Hit multiply times what? 7, and then you have to hit what? Equals. Hit equals, and you should get 5.09. Everybody should be able to get that. And you need to practice it. If you don't have your calculator right now, you need to go home and get the calculator, start bringing it in, and practice this. All right? That's what you need to do. All right? Okay. I mean, that's for all of them. Sine or cosine. Sine, cosine, tangent. Okay? No, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's sine, cosine, or tangent. If it's set up like this, you do it in your calculator the same exact way. All right, let's do another one. What do we get? 20 after? Let's do one more of these, and we'll do one with an angle. Let's do 10. 10's a little bit tougher. So my triangle looks like this. And let's see, 63 degrees right here. And I've got 12 right here, and I've got x right there. And you got to solve for x. All right, well, let's think about what they give us. They gave us this angle, right? So let's use that angle. What about these two sides? What are these two sides to that 63 degrees? What is this side to the 63 degrees? This 12, what is it? It's opposite, right? So I'm going to write in opposite. After a while, you shouldn't have to write that in there. I'm just doing it just to show you which one's which. What about the x? What is the x? It's hypotenuse, right? Now, technically, it is adjacent to the 63 degrees, but it's the hypotenuse. That takes precedent over anything else. So that's the hypotenuse. This would be the adjacent side, okay? This is the hypotenuse. So let's see what we have. We're using this angle. I've got opposite. I've got hypotenuse. Which trig function uses opposite and hypotenuse? Which one? The sine. Right, the sine does. All right, that's got opposite and hypotenuse. Everybody see which one we use? All right, everybody should be getting used to that now. So now we take the sine, since we're using the sine, we use the sine of the angle, which is 63 degrees. The sine of the angle is equal to the opposite divided by the hypotenuse. The opposite is 12, and the hypotenuse is x. This is where the algebra is a little bit different than what we just did. But we talked about this yesterday. I'll show you a nice little shortcut. X is on the bottom. I want it on the top. So where am I going to put that? On the other side on top. This sine of 63 is on the top, but I want to move it to the other side. So where do I put it? On the bottom. So basically, I just switch places with the x and the sine of 63. See what I did? I put the x here, and I put the sine of 63 here. That's how you do the algebra when x is on the bottom. You're going to have to just practice that, okay? I see confused looks on your face on some of you. You're just going to have to look at this and practice it and just do your algebra, okay? I can't go through that anymore. I went through a lot more detail yesterday. Look at the video from yesterday. Now, we're going to plug that into our calculator, and let's see what we get for that. We get 12 divided by the sine of 63. So I hit sine of 63. And I get 13 points. I think, yeah, this still goes two places, right? 0.4 what? 7? 13.47. And that's what x is. Does it make sense that it's 13.47? Sure it does, because it's got to be the longest side, right? It's bigger than 12, so yeah, sure, it makes sense. All right, let's do another one. Let's do one where you have to solve for an angle, and we'll be done with this one. And I'm going to give you a worksheet, and then you need to practice these, okay? You cannot just sit there in class, just half awake, half asleep, and think you're going to understand how to do this stuff. You're only going to understand how to do this if you actually try to do the problems. All right, so they give you this angle right here. So this time we don't know the angle. We have to find the angle. But we do know two sides. And what is this side? This side's 6 to this angle x. What is it? It's opposite. You should be getting used to this by now. What's the 18? It's the hypotenuse. Which trig function are we going to use with opposite and hypotenuse? That's the sine. So, S-O-H, right? Opposite hypotenuse. So we take the sine of what? Of the angle. We always take the sine of the angle. This time we don't know what the angle is. So it's x. Equals the opposite over the hypotenuse. So opposite is 6. Hypotenuse is 18. Now watch. I have to get rid of the sine. So I take the inverse of the sine. And then on the other side, I take the inverse of the sine. That's when you do the second function. Only when you're solving for the angle. Now watch. Plug that into your calculator. Just give me a second. Okay, you got time. Watch. I'm going to hit second function sine of 6 divided by 18. And that gives me 19.47 or 19.5. It says to round it to the nearest tenth. And that's how you do those. Let me give you a worksheet, and then you can go on your way.